Okay, we're going to do a big, crazy Jenny flower that does not exist anywhere in nature. And you can see I've sketched out a really basic kind of a sunflower-ish shape. And we are going to try some striping. We're going to try some splatter. And all we're going to use is a little toothbrush for that. We're going to do some crazy bleeds here. We're going to do dry painting here, dry on dry. And here we're going to try an interesting blend of colors to see what happens when they kiss. We're going to do that over here too, but then we're going to add some texture, some cool texture with just your basic sea sponge. When we do this blend over here, we're going to use ordinary sea salt to make a cool texture in one part of this. And then last but not least, we're going to use a batik technique that you can use art masking fluid for. And the way I'm going to use it is using a little pipette. You don't get great control. You have to squeeze really gently, but it makes for some really cool effects. I might even use it a little bit in here. So let's dig in. Okay, I've lightly outlined the flower shape. And you can see I don't like petals to be right on top of each other. I like them all to be slightly at a different angle to create a little bit of tension in the design. So I'm going to put some of this we're going to be using wet on wet. So the stripy one, I'm going to fill in with water, wet the canvas, the paper basically, and I want it to dry a little bit. Then the blend we're doing, I have to use dirty water so you can see the water. The blend we're doing, it needs to be wet on damp. We have wet on wet, wet on damp, wet on dry. So we're going to start there. Then I think for the splatter, I think I'm going to do dry on dry. Let's put a really nice pink down. I like to mix Scarlet Lake with Opera. So we're just going to put a nice pink down. Oh, yummy. And even though we're going to splatter on top of it, we can still play around with some nice bleeds. Because that's more fun. So let's take a little bit darker color and just let's add some interest to the outer edge. Let it bleed in. Clean up that edge a little. Gives it a little dimension. Okay, I'm going to leave that one for now. Then I also want to use, I think I'm going to go a little bit redder for the one I want to make a stripe out of. So Scarlet Lake again. Let's see. Okay, we're still pretty wet here, but we're getting a really interesting bleed. So that one needs to dry a little bit more. We'll come back to that one. Let's try a blend. So we'll start at the top with my turquoise light, which I absolutely love. Then let's get some Prussian blue. A lot of pigment here. Let's drop it in and see what happens. Push it around. I want a better point here. It's going to be really cool to see what happens. Push it up a little bit more. I think I'm going to get a little bit fancy and put some darker turquoise. down here and let it just sort of tap it in. Let it do its thing. Then we talked about using the resist. I'm going to make, oops, oh, we're making polka dots, okay. If you hold it at an angle, the resist just kind of flows out of it. I don't even have to squeeze it. That's really great. It's taken me a while to learn how to control this pipette. Let's suck up some more. And that's another thing we've got to wait and let it dry. So now I want to do a nice yellowy green. Not a sap green. I'm going to just, I'm going to do wet on dry bleed, and let's see what happens with that. And it's always okay to turn your paper. In fact, it's a great idea because you can get, oh, and look what happened to my other, look what happened to my other bleed. Cool. Happy accident. I am going to use Prussian blue again. It's blending a little bit. I'm going to tap a little bit more pigment along the middle, cheat a little bit, so we can get some nice explosions of color and bleed. Put a little bit more pigment in here. Moving right along. It looks like I'm ready to go back to my top stripe. So I've got my red. Then let's move up to a yellow. Oh, I let it dry too much. That's okay. We can put water in and move it. And let's bring in some of that olive. Sap. Some turquoise. And we'll finish it off with Prussian. So I'm going to take just plain water. Introduce them. I might be making a huge mess, but who knows? I can take my paper towel, pick some up. There are no mistakes. And go back in. Dark magenta down here. Boy, I went crazy with that yellow. Move that green around. Clean up my turquoise. I'm just going to make it a little bit longer by adding some Prussian blue. We can always clean it up later. That's the beauty. It's already looking better. Now, I like to use every color in the crayon box. Let's make a pretty orange. Using yellow and Scarlet Lake. So I'm going to do wet on dry first. And now we're going to drop in some wacky bleeds. Try some Opera Rose. Just tap it in. It's best to mix like colors. Things that sit near each other on the color wheel. Let's try some magenta. Ooh, looks like tie-dye. Wow. Now I'm going to grab some Scarlet Lake. This is a bit drier, this spot. I'll show you what happens if I add a green. I think it will probably make mud. But that's okay. It kind of turns into a neutral. I don't know what will happen if we add yellow. It probably won't show up. But it's fun to try. Oh, look, it's kind of creating a blossom. Let's do that over here too. And then, since we have so much pigment over here in this blend, and I like the way it blended, this is where we're going to toss our salt. I'm just going to use a little bit because I only want it to be in the end. Now I've got to wait for my resist to dry, so I will be right back. Okay, we're ready to wrap up this wacky flower. I've got my rubber cement pickup, find a clean section, and my white isn't totally dry, so I'm going to turn my paper so I don't smudge my paw across wet paint. It's oddly satisfying picking up this resist, and it's a wonderful surprise to see what you end up with. And you try really hard not to tear your paper. But if you do, you can fix it. Let's get that out of here. And if you're gentle, it should be okay. That looks pretty cool. Now for the center. If you want, you can use an X-Acto knife to pick pieces up. And then just use the rubber cement pickup for the leftover parts that you can't get with your knife. Ooh, it kind of looks like the evil eye. you have it. What else do we need here? I think I need a little bit more. That leaves a little boring. Let's tap in some dark blue. I'm adding some lots of pigment, Prussian blue. And then I think we are going to call it a day.